Okay, here we go. Top of the hour workshop time. Are we solving the right problem? Slowing down to speed up in 3 steps with Myriam Hadnes. She is a behavioral economist by training, the host of the Workshops Work podcast, and a devoted facilitator. Motivated by the vision that we can change the world one workshop at a time, she curates the global NeverDoneBefore community that explores the edges of the art and craft of facilitation. Myriam applies scientific insights about human behavior and group dynamics, along with her learnings from experts on her podcast, to help others leverage the power of groups. Myriam, thank you for joining us and leading us in this workshop. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for this introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. And I brought a little experiment and a hypothesis with me, and hoping that it will work out. You will tell me by the end of the session. And I started with the insight, and maybe I should say that I'm obsessed with questions. And I do believe that we are A, very often asking the wrong questions, and B, very often moving too quickly into solutions, into ideas, and we're not sitting long enough with questions so that actually more insights might evolve. So my hypothesis is that if we engage more with questions, the ideas that will follow will be better. And I got inspired by Albert Einstein's quote that said, if I had a problem and only 1 hour to solve it, I would use 55 minutes to find the right question and 5 minutes for the solution. So this is our inspiration for the next 90 minutes. And we'll test it and have sufficient time, hopefully, to debrief so that we can put our facilitator's hat on and off, maybe our researcher's hat on and off, and share the experience on what the specific design that I've brought here today for you, how it will impact our ability to generate ideas. All excited? Awesome. Unfortunately, I don't see all of you. Yes, I see Elise and David because I'm on Spotlight and I'm not used to just see my own face so large. So what we're going to do now is we'll turn to our neighbors. So you just moved to the new workshop space. So you found your seat, you sat down, and now what you want to do, you want to know who's sitting next to you, right? In this virtual space. So we'll take 4 minutes to turn to our neighbor. So what will happen is you'll find a beautiful other soul who is sharing this space with you. And the Zoom gods will decide who is sitting next to you. And we have an easy routine, and I hope that it's in the chat. It will appear in the chat in a second. Exactly. So the routine is that once you enter the space, you'll start with a smile. And then I suggest that the person who ate tomatoes last, so if you had tomatoes just now during the last break, then you will start. If you have an allergy against tomatoes, then you will go second. So the person who ate tomatoes last will start. And you will answer the question, what was the most powerful question you've ever been asked? And your partner would just listen. No need to understand, no need to comment, no need to ask further questions, but you're just sitting there listening to appreciate what you're hearing about the most powerful question that your partner has been asked. After 2 minutes, we'll send you a little message into the breakout rooms to let you know that it's time to switch. You smile, you thank each other, and then it's about the other person to answer the same question. What was the most powerful question you've ever been asked? Make sense? If you're ready, show us your thumbs, and then we'll see you back in 4 minutes. So, how was that? What came up? who would like to share on behalf of the group what intrigued you, what surprised you in your group conversation?
At first, nothing really surprised. At first, nothing really surprised us. Everything seemed like, and then someone pointed out a post-it, which is why are we writing on post-its? So that was actually a good vehicle for additional questions.
Interesting. Yeah, the big why, looking behind what we're doing on the meta level. Beautiful. Yeah. Thanks, Bruce. I saw Shannon's physical hand up.
Yeah. David brought up a very good point that these post-its don't have our names on them. So that even like the questions we were willing to ask, there was a much larger state of like psychological safety that we were willing to put any question that we could think of out there without worrying about whether it was silly or wrong or any retribution or anything like that. And so really like, how can you make it so that people can just be creative without thinking about all of that other politics stuff? It was a really interesting sort of like meta thing on the sticky board.
Yeah, the dimension of psychological safety for idea generation and for asking questions. Because asking questions, it's quite vulnerable. It's a vulnerable thing to do. Because in our minds, we are still in the belief that if we are asking questions, that means that we don't know. Although, as I said in the beginning, I believe that nowadays we ask questions because of a different motivation. It's because we want to learn about someone else's perspective. Thank you. What else?
I was hoping Manalo or Lisa would raise their hands because we spent most of the time talking about how important it is to have a meal together to do this work. And that being in a relational space that is nourishing in every sense of the word, it was also particularly relevant to all three of our work. So that was really interesting because, at first we said, we're not surprised by anything. We've been around the block.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you. And sharing a meal, being nourished and nurtured it's important for idea generation and doing creative work. And so thank you for your observations. I hope you enjoyed the conversations and engaging with the questions and exploring them. What we're doing next is we're still not answering the questions. We continue to engage with them yet in a different way. And I'm trying something new with you today. So what I did in the meantime, while you were in your breakouts, I copied all the questions into this field. And if you zoom out, you will see that there are actually 5 spaces, 5 lines. And the number of your breakout room is the number in front of the space that you will work on. And depending on your breakout room, you will cluster the questions in a different way. So for instance, group number 1, in breakout group number 1, you will cluster the questions in a framework in quadrants and decide whether the question is irrelevant or relevant. And to what extent is the question surprising or expected? So what you're going to do is you take the sticky note and you move it into one of these quadrants, depending on where your group and you see that question. And you do as much as you can. You have 12 minutes in total. Group number 2 will do the clustering as I would say, know it. You find 2 or more questions that belong to the same group, and then you take one of these placeholders and you change the name over here, right? And you place it to give it group names. Group number 4, again, a different way of clustering from easy to answer to difficult to answer, irrelevant to answer to important to answer. Group number 5 just says between low priority and high priority. And finally, group 6 uses some of the pre-existing clusters and can still define new clusters down there.
Hey, Myriam, we don't have group 3, right?
Pardon me?
We don't have group 3.
Correct.
Correct.
This is correct. And that's why the big number next to the cluster says 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. Right? So if I, let me share again. Share. Here we go. So you see here, there's a big 6. And here's a big 5. And here's a big 4. And there's no 3, but a 2 and a 1. I was thinking of that. So this was a little housekeeping that we did while you were in the break. Well, you were in the breakout. Everything clear? Instructions into the chat, and you'll have 12 minutes in total. And then we come back, and then we make sense, and then we see how this all comes together. Welcome back, everyone. We are so curious. It was beautiful, I must say, to just observe the movement on the mirror board in the different groups and to see how the different prompts to cluster might have affected the dynamics in your groups, and not hearing, but just observing. So I am very curious to hear from the different groups, and maybe from each group, someone can volunteer to share with us what has emerged, what did you notice through the clustering. And maybe we can hear from group number 1. Let me see the breakout rooms. And in
I can do that if you like, just to save you time. I was with Kerry, who had to leave, Barb and Shannon, and we split the questions up by row. So we each took a row and sorted them into the criteria of the expected, surprising, irrelevant, and relevant. So we worked individually, and then we discussed what we learned from that exercise, which was very subjective. So, you know, if we'd all had different sections to sort and we were doing this again, we'd all come up with something probably a bit different. And so the criteria that you're looking at leads to more questions. And it's also very subjective. So, you know, what I think is surprising might be very different to what Barb thinks is surprising. And so that led us to think about having criteria to select ideas up front so that people feel included and, you know, are in agreement about how, you know, ideas are going to be taken forward is helpful. But I'll pause there and let others speak.
Thank you, Lani. Yeah, intriguing how a framework on to cluster ideas impacts then if you haven't known before how to cluster, how to think about it. Thank you. Who would like to share with us from group number 3, group number 2, cluster number 2? How was that? What came up while engaging and clustering the questions?
I go with if everyone is okay. We named the cluster as purpose related, strategy related, logistic and design, and team dynamic and relationship. So basically what we did look at all the whys, they were going to the purpose, all the what if, what goes to the strategy, and anything related to designing the meeting, and anything related to them, like the character of the meeting, went to the logistic, and everything related to the engagement between the people and the relationship design went to the team dynamic and relationship. But it was actually making more sense when we put them in those cluster. We didn't get to all the questions to put them in those clusters, and we were in the middle of thinking of the new cluster to add in a table to add the rest of the questions, but we didn't get it. Let's do it. Yeah.
Thank you. What kind of conversations came up through the clustering? Were the conversations or the curiosity going in a specific direction?
I think one of the things was we were struggling to understand some of the questions. So what we ended up is, it is important to know how to ask the question too, to be clear. And it was some of the question that we didn't know exactly should go to the logistic or it should go to the strategy. So we learned that before even going to putting the questions on each cluster, making sure that we all understand what does that cluster mean. Group 1, yeah.
Yeah. What is behind the question? How can we really know what the question is about? Wonderful. Thank you so much, Amire, for summarizing for your team. Group number 3.
We didn't have group number 3.
Sorry, group number 4. Now I'm falling in the same trap. Group number 4. Easy to answer, important to answer. Who would like to summarize what has happened in your group?
David, did you want to go? I saw you unmuted. Okay. All right. So as you can see, we didn't do much simply because we had no criteria to make our decision. So every question, like David was coming at it from his point of view. I was coming at it from my point of view. Relitza was coming at it from her point of view. And so even in my profession, you develop a criteria for decision-making before you try to make the decision. For example, how to get everyone smiling at the same time. David's well, yes, everybody needs to be smiling, but I do a lot of work in the emotional intelligence space. So I was hell's no, people need to be validated. And a lot of change happens when people are angry, right? And so we spent a considerable amount of time. We didn't even finish that conversation. We were snatched out of the room. And so what I learned, or what really affirmed for me, is develop a criteria to make the decision and then start categorizing it. We didn't do that. I don't know if David and Relitza want to add to that.
I thank you for tag teaming me. I think one of the great things that came out of that exercise is there were a number of these ideas that I think merit further exploration. So it's almost like coming full circle, where you take some of these ideas and you start trying to put things together, and it leaves you with more questions than answers. So just as one example, when we talk about how might we stimulate others to see new perspectives, that's something that's maybe a little more challenging online to do, but it merits a separate brainstorming, immediately. So I really like that more challenges came out of this than ready to go ideas.
I see a pattern already, and I'm excited to debrief in a bit. Thank you so much, Manal and David, for walking us through your insights and group work. Cluster number 5, where we just had a line between low priority and high priority. Who would like to share what came up for you?
Well, I was in that group and I have a silence simply because I think Nancy would be taking this. Nancy, would you care to represent us?
Well, I always talk, which is I was trying not to talk because I talk too much and I've had caffeine and I shouldn't have caffeine. But I immediately said, "Oh shit, I got put in this group," not because of the people, because I hate linear sorting. And it's kind of like there's no
The Zoom gobs were speaking to you.
There's no context, there's no criteria. There's so many things to do that you start throwing things in without being able to thoughtfully do it. It became a joke. So we said, first of all, let's change the labels. Let's disrupt this. Let's, try and do something else. But I think, the real meat of the conversation and Kelvin and Bruce, did Kelvin go away? I don't see Kelvin anymore. No, there you are, Kelvin.
There, he's there. Yeah, he's
there. I can't see. Is that this whole idea of brainstorming and generating billions of ideas without context and purpose it tells us that sometimes we shouldn't be brainstorming. So, guys, I'm sure there was more than that, but I was being ornery. I really was being ornery.
Anything to add, Bruce?
No, that's good. I like a good challenge, so I was looking to find a way that we could all figure out a way to put the Post-its in the right place.
Thank you, Nancy and Bruce, for walking us through your experience of the clustering and making sense of the questions. And last but not least, we had group number 6, where some names of clusters were given and others were open to be changed. Who would like to summarize their conversation for us?
I can jump in and start. I was with Sean and Angelica. And then my Zoom cut off halfway through, so I was only there for like 5 of the 10 minutes. But being able to have the predetermined places and just kind of do a first round, it was kind of individually, like we were just like, okay, does this attract to this? And we did our kind of first gut check to put things into their buckets, and that's kind of the card sorting that we were doing. As we were going, we noticed maybe and had the freedom and trust in each other to be able to come up with those new categories that kind of corresponded and riffed off and identified some of the gaps that were there or that were missing from that predetermined selection. In this mural board, I wish there was a little bit more room. I tried to just make it a little bit bigger because it started smushing into each other as we were starting to fill. We also realized there was a lot. People was one of the predetermined topics, and I think a lot of our questions that we found that people were asking are all centered around people and teams and that connection between some tend to be the majority of the questions. Always thinking about how people are interacting and what they're doing. Angelica or Sean, do you have any additions?
I don't know about an addition, but a comment after listening to everyone else and then getting to go last. I think that context of understanding where the question came from and what the person is really saying when they ask becomes really important, because the people one was big because it had people in it, basically. And you might could have put them somewhere, some other places too, but it had people in it, so it just went naturally to people.
Thank you, Ross and Sean. Thank you, everyone. A little Zoom applause to all of you and the work and for doing this. What I observe, and it kind of confirms what I assumed previously, that depending on the prompts we're giving, we have different sorts of conversations that happen. And I often wonder why are we clustering in the first place? And it seems that very often we are not clear on why we're clustering, so that we would spend either too much time getting the clusters right, and then what for? Or we are being too fast and just, oh, let's get the job done. So what I observe is if we have linear, or if we have predefined or easy to cluster exercises with, okay, put them together and give them a name, then the likelihood of engaging with the ideas and the content is lower, and we're more likely to, okay, let's get the job done. Whereas when it's a little bit out of the box and maybe frameworks that we're not familiar with, then we tend to look into the content and engage with it to see, okay, do we actually understand the content, and how do we understand the clustering, so that we wrap our heads around the actual topic more. And in my perspective, a clustering exercise with many ideas is, in the end, and please tell me if you disagree, is most of the time to structure our thoughts, and to have a structure or a nudge for participants to actually engage with the ideas. Because there are simply too many. And when we ask them, take 3 minutes to read through all the ideas, we don't remember a single idea. If we ask a group to cluster them in a way or form that is maybe unusual or doesn't make sense, then they will take time to look into the ideas, discuss them, and find differences and nuances, and actually realize how little they understand of the content that has been put in. And then it's easier to actually get in the next stage to, okay, what are we doing with all of these ideas? So to me personally, and I think this exercise has shown it a little bit, hopefully, that depending on the cluster as a means to an end, to nudge groups to engage with the content in a different way. And depending on how important it is to either structure the information or engage with the content, we might want to use different clustering exercises. But this workshop wasn't about clusters. Before I go on, yes. Before I go on, any comments or thoughts? Anyone says, no, Myriam, I disagree. Tell me, tell us. Yes, Amy.
I do not disagree. And I think workshops upon workshops we done about clustering. So I'm really grateful for all of the insights that you elicited from this activity. This is also, I just want to call out that clustering is a place where often it is one of the most important parts of a decision-making process. And it's also where the group dynamics and lack of psychological safety and power dynamics come into play when there's a clock ticking. And so it's often, I find, so important and done so rapidly and so poorly that it sets up a group for failure, or at least mess. The other thing, the social scientist in me hates clustering because I like coding. The idea that every sticky goes in one pile as opposed to multiple different kinds of codes is something that I find frustrating, and I just wanted to call that out. Not just that it's frustrating to me, but there's value in having one idea encoded as multiple things.
Thank you, Amy. Yes, Nancy.
So Amy just put into words what I was feeling, which is, for me, if the clustering initiates or stimulates valuable conversation that leads to meaning making or decision making or prioritization, then it was a useful exercise. Clustering for clustering's sake is busy work, right? And when there's disagreement about where something should be placed, that's the conversation I want to hear, because that's where either we're working at the wrong level and we need to go higher or lower, or higher, or where we understand that we do not see the world in the same way, or that we think we're doing something completely different than the other person is doing. and having space and time for that. Yeah, David, yeah. It is really important. So, and I think the obsession with quote unquote brainstorming often leads us to wonder what is it we're really trying to do.
Thank you for being so critical, Nancy. And I hope so. Yesterday I had a beautiful conversation about the aesthetics of tension and release in a workshop. So I'm glad that now we have this tension of what we were clustering just for clustering's sake. What were you doing, Myriam? So now we have this tension, and now I would like to invite you to the release and then to a final sense making, because now we're coming to what all of this workshop was actually really about. And I am therefore inviting you for a final brainstorm on ideas. So right beside the clusters, you now have a new space that looks like the very first space that we used. So I'm inviting you to brainstorm ideas. How might we best engage teams in creative idea generation? So that's how we started. And then we brainstorm questions around this prompt. And now full circle, I want you to do the same exercise again with how might we best engage teams in creative idea generation. And please use so we're doing this as one group in a silent brainstorm, just for 3 minutes, just like in the beginning, and use the space next to your cluster. So we do this all in the same space, silent brainstorm, 3 minutes. Did we do 2 or 3 minutes in the very beginning? 3 minutes. So we'll do this for 3 minutes. Thank you. And then we'll debrief with the checkout and closure. Make sense? So if you're ready, then I will put on the clock and we have 3 minutes. Just as I see some questions being copied, we're now brainstorming ideas, right? So answers to the question. 30 seconds left. Time is up. Thank you. So we have 7 minutes. And I would like to invite, oh yes, music. We forgot about the music. How was that? Especially when you think of the first idea generation. And now the idea generation, after having been engaged with questions about the prompt. What do you observe? How was that for you? And what are you taking away? Yes, Shannon.
So I was in group 1 when we did the clusters. And so we were the relevant, irrelevant, expected, and unexpected. And that there's a bunch of questions that you know you're going to ask and you need to answer before the session. Like, why don't we just answer those questions ahead of time? Like, what if everyone walked into the creative meeting knowing the problem that you're going to solve, what the expectations are, all of those sorts of things, so that the actual conversation in that meeting is about those unexpected questions. Like, that would really free up a lot of time and space and get everyone on the same page before you even get there.
Thank you. So you're more aware now of the logistics and the process of what has to be done. Thank you. Linda.
Hi, everyone. I found it was almost cathartic to see our process in the latest step. It was much of kill your darlings. We were really brainstorming previously, and the way it was a silent exercise, of course, but I think it was fewer and more key aspects that they came into play. Would be interesting to have a re-conversation with the group after to see how they also found it. Yeah.
Thank you, Linda. And I also saw this answers Nancy White's question in the chat. Why were there fewer ideas? And I think agreeing with Linda, fewer ideas, but more in depth. I think if we compare the ideas in the beginning and now the ideas, there may be fewer, but they might be higher in quality and more reflected ideas. What are you taking away in your heart on your to-do list from this session? What did you notice? Popcorn checkout. Russ.
So I had the virtue of not being here in the beginning. So this is my first idea generation, but I wonder if a phenomenon is that the more time that you stew on the question, the more refined it gets. So multiple rounds of asking the same question and being able to distill and have those multiple checkpoints that you go through can start to marinate those answers, responses, and mature how you think about the question in those new ways.
Thank you. The quality gets deeper. We look at it in a different way. Yeah. And maybe we're less overconfident in just coming up with any random idea, because if we're looking at the question closer, we become aware of the complexity actually, and that it's not that easy to answer. Hence, fewer ideas.
I will just add to Shannon's point in the chat. So I work for myself, and for those of us who work for ourselves, especially like as facilitators, sometimes it can be difficult outlining the value of what facilitation is. I think a lot of the clients that I work with, I have to do a lot of value setting in our initial conversations, because they simply think that there's zero prep work. Like they'll say it's like 1 day stakeholder engagement. Like, do you understand the amount of work that goes into preparing folks to have those really difficult conversations? And sometimes like I'll have stakeholder engagements with like policymakers and healthcare practitioners discussing really heavy issues like health equity. And like there's a level of preparation that goes into that. And I think they miss it. And this exercise demonstrated to me that that prep work is vital to the quality of work that comes out of it. And so thank you, Shannon, for concisely putting that, but I felt like I needed to add a little bit of the spice in like the passion in my voice, because it's something that I emphasize a lot in the conversations that I have with a lot of folks that I work with.
Thank you, Manal. So we're coming to an end. Thank you, everyone, for staying with me and bearing with me to maybe some discomfort in the process. And I hope that you're taking away something for your own practice, but also for the nature of this experiment and how might we engage teams in creative idea generation, which will be the next step of this project after the symposium. So I'm looking forward to seeing you back in one of the experiments and for the design challenge, and of course in the other workshops. Thank you, Elise and Dave, for inviting me. And see you later.